So I'm looking forward to that. So what we typically do when we start these events is we roll around and we do a quick introduction. So we typically just say our name, what our company is, or where we work. And if there's one thing we're excited to get out of today, we can add that in. So I kind of rambled on about how much I'm excited for today and to hear from Vince a little bit. So I'll keep my introduction short. My name is Rachel Adams, and I'm the marketing and events coordinator at Startup Zone. And I'll kind of go around with everyone how I see them on my screen. So Carol, if you want to go up next.
Hi, I'm Carol O'Hanley, and I'm the co-owner and office manager of Exit Realty PEI.
Awesome. Tracy.
Me?
Yes. I feel like we know you now in the wellness webinar, but just in case Vince hasn't been able to meet you yet, if you just want to do a quick introduction, your name, your company, if you have one, or where you work, just anything you're looking forward to getting out of today. And thank you for joining us again.
No, I'm not used to being called Tracy, so when people say it, I have to is she talking to me or?
Do you go by Lynn?
I'm Tracy Lynn.
Tracy Lynn. Okay,
Tracy
now
Lynn.
we know. Tracy Lynn.
Yeah. So I'm a mentoring coordinator with Big Brothers Big Sisters on PEI. And as you know, I've taken many of the webinars through Start Zone throughout the COVID-19. And for today, it's just, finding ways to keep being productive. I found I was doing extraordinarily well the first several weeks. And
then you hit a wall?
I'm finding it harder to keep that momentum going.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us again.
Hello?
I'm really looking forward to hearing a bit more about that too. Hey, you kind of froze for a little bit, but we got most of it. Sorry, the introductions end up being so awkward every time.
Okay,
They're a
perfect.
good way to kind of get to know everyone. But thank you, Tracy Lynn. I'm looking forward to all that stuff as well. Erin, if you want to take it away.
Hey guys, I'm Erin Grober. I'm the operations manager at the Startup Zone. I'm just interested in hearing Vince chatting about how I can get my butt back in gear. Same deal. Yeah. No, we've been working really hard over the Startup Zone, but it's always good to hear how we can work a little harder.
100%.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I'm excited for Vince to get us back in shape too. Hillary, if you're there and you want to do a quick introduction.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Hi, I'm Hillary. I'm with Fresh Start Fromage. We're a vegan cheese company based in PEI. I'm doing this while cooking lunch, so I have my video off. But I will be tuning in. Yeah, I'm really excited. I guess I usually always work from home, so just looking to kind of refine that even better. Yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome. Thanks, Hillary. And finally, Pat Sebastian, if you want to do a quick introduction.
Hello, I'm Pat Sebastian. I'm business coach at Startup Zone and independently with Sebastian Business Development Consulting. I am here to listen to the wisdom and awesomeness of Vince.
Awesome.
That is
that's
both
a really great way to
inaccurate
sum it up.
and far too humble.
He hates it when I say stuff like that. So of
Yeah.
course I say a lot of stuff like that.
I love it. Well, with that, we have all of our introductions out of the way. So Vince, I'll let you take it away. We have about an hour and a half booked in today. I know it'll probably be really interactive, so we'll see how long we go, but I'm just excited to hear a bit more from you. And I'm going to turn my mic off now.
Okay. Hey guys. I might do a quick introduction. Please feel free to jump in at any point. This is not designed to be me talking at you for an hour and a half. You would all fall asleep, and this isn't like an insomnia seminar. So I'm Vince. I'm a doctor of genetics, actually, by training. And I split my time between running project teams and doing some consulting work where I work with generally larger businesses on internal people problems. This workshop came specifically because I have a really tight-knit, really productive team, and then COVID hit us and a bunch of us hit the wall. And I can't get my guys to take weekends. I can't get them to go home when they're meant to go home. And so figuring out how to fix that problem kind of generated some material that I hope might be useful for other people. The aim here is that this is interactive, and I'd love you guys to talk. It's not just me talking at you. So jump in anytime, jump in the chat, but just talk. Don't worry about anything particularly formal. What we're going to do is go through a couple of quick tools, hopefully some very practical stuff that's going to get your teams moving forward again. First thing that I want to point out is, from my perspective, and that's a scientist. I manage a team of epidemiologists, and I have a genetics background. I'm not going to be the guy to tell you that this is a pretend crisis. Somebody told me it was a conspiracy by the virus, which is just about the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and also utterly hilarious because viruses. There are people around very close to us protesting with guns because apparently guns can stop viruses. I'm not going to tell you that. The situation is pretty bad. It's going to get worse. We have about 4 million infected at the moment. That's a massive underestimation. We've got about 250,000 dead. We're facing down the worst economic downturn in our lifetimes by far. This is going to make the GFC look nice by comparison. Everybody I know in business is stressed. We still only have the very beginnings of an effective treatment. And while things are moving forward, we don't have a vaccine. On top of that, and I'm sure Tracy can back us up with this, one of the lovely side effects of pandemics and lockdowns is that it increases things like the domestic violence rate and the murder rate. So it's a shit show. So why even try? This is the first point. So situation is hard. It's getting harder. We don't have an end in sight. What do we do? So generally talking to people who are doing business at the moment, they give me a couple of options. The first two are just hide under the bed, hope it goes away. Second one is compulsively read the news, stop sleeping, feel sick all the time, and take years off your life with stress. I'm going to say neither of those are productive. They don't move our teams forward. They don't move our clients forward. They don't move our families forward. So we're not going to do them. The other thing that I hear sometimes from people is, well, it's a pandemic, so I'm going to be like Isaac Newton. Those of you who are not giant nerds like me, Isaac Newton came up with gravity, the idea of gravity while in lockdown for the Black Plague. Generally, for most of us, no, we are not going to be like Isaac Newton. That's also kind of dumb. Pushing yourself to be uber productive when everything is difficult is not a good way forward. What we want is the fourth option. We want to do our best to move ourselves, our teams, our businesses, and our clients forward. And to give you a little bit of a different perspective, yes, things are definitely rough right now. At the same time, in the history of humanity, we have never seen medical research progress this fast. We have never seen international collaboration at this scale. The vaccine development is going so fast that we have no idea when it's going to be ready because we're cutting orders of magnitude off development time in every single step. On top of that, for those of you who run businesses, remember that GMC, Disney, Google, IBM, even Trader Joe's, they have one thing in common. They were started during difficult financial times. For those of you who run small businesses, now is a really interesting time because the really big businesses are struggling, and that also creates opportunity for you. For those of you who run bigger businesses, I know that a lot of people are finding it tough. I also know that one of the teams I work with developed a new product, and they do heavy industry manufacturing, right? They're not anything that you would expect to sell during this time period. So as well as developing a new heavy industry product, they also started manufacturing ventilators But on top of those two things, they sold out of their first run of their brand new trailer, and their primary market for it was Quebec, which is still shut down. On top of that, they just secured a military contract, and they developed a whole new section of their product line. Those guys are local. They're PI company. So yes, it is difficult, but on the flip side, with every great economic shift has to come opportunity. The companies that can do best in this time will set themselves up for what happens next. So we're going to see new market leaders emerge now, and I'd love for your teams and your companies to be those market leaders. Also, for people like Tracy Lynn, the world needs you now more than it did a year ago. So there is very good reasons for wanting to keep going. We also need a functioning economy because we need to pay people so they can eat, they can keep their families in houses, all that kind of stuff. We need to find a way to move forward in the new normal. Yeah. All right. The workshop is basically uses a little bit of what I do for a living, which is applying the principles of biology and psychology to teams to get performance outcomes. So we're going to look at no theory, just practical things that you guys should be able to apply with your teams today and tomorrow. And we want to get productivity outcomes by the end of the week. So this is just a quick shake, move forward, make things a little bit easier. Anybody have questions so far? I want to get an idea, like, how are you guys actually doing? Carol, you're the only one who's brave enough to be on video. So why don't you start? How you doing at the moment? How are you guys doing?
So we have a real estate brokerage. So we have about 28 agents, and I have 3 staff. So our staff are doing phenomenal. They're probably working too much remotely. And our agents are kind of up and down. Do you know what I mean? Like, some are really hammering it out, and others have just sort of dropped away. The ones that aren't doing a lot are not comfortable with technology. So they're hesitant to do virtual meetings with clients or what have you. And myself personally, I've been up and down since we closed our office March 17th. So some weeks I'm very productive, other weeks not so much. So I guess I'm not really worried about my teams. I feel like they're more productive than I am. It's more for myself or anything that I can pass on to my agents that can help them be more productive.
That's I'm actually hearing a lot of that from people who have, your agents are, their job is very people focused.
It is.
And interestingly, I've got a couple of engineers who work with me and a couple of super technical guys. And I'm asking them how they're doing, and they're like, yeah, Vince, my day's the same. I get up, I work on my computer, I stop, I go for a walk, I come back, I work on my computer, I'm at home. So, like my any other day. At the same time, I'm seeing entire sales teams stop. One of the guys we do some work with, their sales team stopped. They just stopped. Everybody in the sales team stopped. The boss had to go in and say, hey guys, what are you doing? And they were like, well, what's the point? Like, no, hold on a second. We still have to keep everybody here with a paycheck until this is finished. And the stuff we make, people need. This is not a time to stop working. But if you're a people person, this isolation is really tough. And if your primary skill set is talking with people, especially if you're somebody who likes doing face-to-face meetings, and that's all I run is up until this thing, I ran, and Pat will back me up here, very strange face-to-face workshops where I get people to do a lot of stupid things. Sorry, that's my dog making itself heard. It's very normal for those kind of people to really be a little bit up and down and struggle with the adjustment.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to jump in? Hillary?
Hi. So we're doing quite well, I guess. With all things considered, I guess we're trying to see the silver linings in it. It's just me and my boss in the business, so it makes it easier for her to just have one employee that she kind of has to worry about. We took a couple weeks at the beginning of all this to try to figure out what we were going to do. But when the wage subsidy program was released, it was great because that's what we're doing now for my wages. But my boss, Jelaine, she said something really great, and she said, now we have time to work on the business, not just in the business.
Yeah.
So she's being able to focus on more of her B-list kind of stuff, and in turn, she's able to train me more. So I'm learning a lot of stuff about bookkeeping, which is great. So I'm learning new skills that maybe before there wouldn't have been the time to teach me. So we've been adapting as best we can, I guess. But yeah, we're looking for those silver linings for sure.
Yeah, look, people still eat cheese, right?
They do.
They haven't stopped eating cheese. This is really important, guys. One of the groups we're talking to has a burn rate of $500,000 a week. So while they're not making money, they're burning $500,000 a week in capital. There's two of you. You guys aren't. At the moment, if I'm a cheese producer, I'd rather be you guys. This is a time where you can take massive market share because you have the capacity to scale a business model that nobody else has yet because no one else has had to deal with this, which is really interesting. And there's some really interesting stuff coming out about, well, if we all shop from home for the next 6 months, how many of us are going to want to go to the store to get our cheese? I didn't even realize that there was grocery pickup in Charlottetown. I'm amazed. I love it. I'm never going back into Walmart ever. I might be in a minority there. I'm not good walking around shops. It doesn't work for me. So we got to take the positives out of this, and there really can be some. Anybody else? Tracy, Pat, how you guys holding up?
Hi, it's Tracy Lynn. I'm doing okay. I've been steadily productive working on several programs. The one thing I love about this session with you is one of my main programs is working with youth who face barriers of a variety of in a variety of areas, and this is a great way for not only me to learn how to be more productive, but it's a great way for me to learn the tools that I can pass on to the youth I'm working with on how to be productive since school's not going back in or even going on into post-secondary education, how to stay motivated when you don't want to, if the weather's bad or during times like these. So this is just a great opportunity for me to learn and for me to take this information and help the individuals I work with every day stay successful as well.
Okay. If it's any help at all, part of what I do is teach biology and business at the university, and I'm super happy to set up one of these with your kids and take them through exactly how to stay high performing if you're a student, because it's slightly different.
Well, I've been a student, and I'm a single mom as well, so I know
You've got skills in this area.
Yeah, I do, but I always love the opportunity to learn, because the more I learn, the more that I can help the people I'm working with.
Makes perfect sense. All right. So what we're going to do is basically just go through 3 steps. First step is a morning routine. Second step is an end of day planning activity that will take 5 minutes to learn and you can work with your teams. And the last one is a task-based time block for the workday. And the reasons they're in this order is generally if you don't start the day right, the day is going to be a write-off. It's very difficult to refocus halfway through a workday and make it work. And then if you don't have good planning in a work from home scenario where you have outside stress, I don't know if anybody else can see that picture, but it's great. When you have outside stress, that's really difficult. So that's why we have a planning activity in there. Last one is time blocks, because realistically for lots of people who have kids at home or have a bunch of other responsibilities. A single uninterrupted workday is not happening at the moment. What we can do is carve out blocks of productivity and make sure we get stuff done in those blocks. And then even if we have to work other things around that, that's still okay. So generally, the advantage of a morning routine is, one of the problems at the moment is that our bodies and our brains are not built for this kind of existential stress. Okay. So your body experiences stress from an evolutionary perspective as danger. So it thinks you're in danger. It thinks there is a tiger trying to eat you. There are lots of things that are really useful to do when a tiger is trying to eat you. And basically those break down to fight, flight, and freeze. Beat it to death with a stick, run away really fast, and freeze so it doesn't see you. This is why in the Olympics, people break world records, because the increased stress and all the hormones from being in front of a couple of million people in a stadium increases performance on simple activities. It's also why we don't do the math Olympics in a stadium with 300,000 people watching. The stress does not allow you to creatively problem solve. Anytime I up your stress levels, I'm going to drop your ability to creatively solve problems. Except everybody here today, their primary job is creative problem solving. Particularly now. Normally that's the same case. But now, even more so than ever, all of the systems you have, they don't work right now. So your job is going to be to creatively solve problems. That's really difficult to do in not a work environment, when you're stressed and when there's intrusive outside pressures. So we're going to set up a morning routine to create some space to say, okay, this is home and this is work. And now they're separate. Even though they might be in the same physical location, but implementing just a couple of things that you do every day, that's going to build a little bit of mental space and give you some room back to creatively problem solve. Is that a sensible idea for people? We'll talk a little bit about
I think so.
load. Yeah, it kind of makes sense, right?
Well, before I went out into doing my own business, I worked from home for 2.5 years. So when when the pandemic hit, I guess the public health emergency hit mid-March, this was like the first thing that I had to remind myself to do, smack myself in the face and say, oh, you just let your morning routine, you don't have that for working from home. Like, no wonder you're not productive and you feel kind of crappy. So first thing I did, after 3 days, and then I felt better and got more work done.
It makes a difference. Yeah. It's
Well,
go ahead, Sherry.
No, finish what you were saying, please. I'm sorry.
No, please, jump in, Tracy Lynn.
No, all I was going to say is I'm very adamant about routine. I like routine. And when this all hit, I kept my morning routine as if I was going to the office. And I have a separate desk, which would have normally been my schooling desk, that I turned into my workspace. It closes over in the evenings. It has doors. That way I don't see my work stuff. I open it up during the day. And I work, it's also facing against a wall, so I can't see the computer, I can't see anything else. And I even put up a divider so that I'm not distracted by my son or my animals or the kitchen or anything else that's going on. And I've kept my morning routine, even I know for a lot of people it's easy to get up and stay in your PJs all day. I know for me, I can't do that. So I got up, I make my coffee, I feed my animals, I go for a little walk, I come back, I wash up, and I get dressed as if I'm going to the office. And although that's been absolutely amazing for, several weeks, I'm finding it's just not doing it anymore.
Yep.
I don't know if that makes any sense. Although mentally I'm setting myself up in the same way I normally would to drive, instead of driving to the office, which isn't very far, I'm now doing the walk to kind of wrap my head and get into place.
Yeah.
That just doesn't seem to be working as much as it did for the last 6 weeks.
Okay, we're going to establish that routine baseline, and then we're going to check a very specific routine. Guys, the physical spacing stuff that Tracy Lynn is doing is actually really clever if you can do it in your house. So if you can create a physical environment that's different from the rest of your home environment, if that works for you, I'd love you to do it. And I'd also love you to consider closing that door at the end of the day and not looking at it again. Most of the problems people are having at the moment is massive hours without the productivity to match. So I've got people responding to work emails at 3 a.m. That's not healthy for them. I don't want them doing it, but they're not being able to turn off. It's also really nice to have, so we just ordered another desk on Amazon, which I've set up somewhere. And at that desk, I don't check my Twitter. I don't check my Facebook. It's a work environment. If you can do that physical distancing stuff, great. We don't dwell on it too much here just because not everybody can do it. But first, we're going to go through the steps of a morning routine that are really high performance. And then we're going to tweak with a couple other things that might get you unstuck. So the morning routine of the one I use, and this comes from a guy called Tim Ferriss, who was a productivity expert. And it's really simple. It's make bed, meditate or pray, short amount of exercise, breakfast, and journal for 5 to 10 minutes. These are kind of weird things that most adults don't do all the time. So we're going to go through them and explain why they work. So first step.
Could you repeat that list, please? You cut out.
Sorry. So make your bed, a short meditation or prayer session, a short exercise session, like very short, not breakfast, and journal for 5 to 10 minutes. And we're just going to go through each of those and why they make sense to put into a morning routine. So the first one is just making your bed. All we're doing here is tweaking the psychology. So we're going to give you a win first thing in the morning. It's also going to reduce clutter in your house. And now that I have time to do hobbies at home, there's clutter in my house. And it makes going to bed a little bit less stressful. The next thing that, and this morning routine is taken from interviews with about 5,000 really high performers around the world. So it's interesting that this is what fell out as being effective. The next one is either meditation or prayer. Now, the benefit of those things are, firstly, you build endorphins, which make you feel good. Your brain chemicals will make you feel good, and reduce stress, which is really important right now. Second thing is meditation. We know from scientific studies builds focus. And so those two things makes 5 to 10 minutes of that work really well. We've got a couple of resources here that kind of work. Headspace, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of that. They've added in a free section specifically for COVID-19. That's worth looking at. I linked in the slides to a 5-minute mindfulness meditation. To be honest, I really struggle with mindfulness meditation. I can't do it, but lots of people show really good benefits from it. Right at the end of the slides, I put in a 5-minute breath work session with a guy called Wim Hof. Wim Hof is a very strange Norwegian man. And his breathing meditations are one of the tools I use for really stressed executives. So it is the quickest way I've ever seen to reset stress levels in people's bodies. Also, just because I'm a giant nerd, in particular, the breathing stuff that he works on has been shown scientifically to do absolutely bizarre things to the body, including modulate the immune system. It means you get sick less often. We have no idea why it works, but it does work. So make your bed, 2 minutes, meditation or prayer, 5 to 10 minutes. Exercise. Now, the idea with exercise is always exercise should be taken often and not seriously. And as either the Pats or Aaron can tell you, I'm not the guy who exercises. I don't run away from things unless they're chasing me. Now, I moved from Australia where things chase you a lot to Canada, specifically to PI where nothing chases you. But in this case, exercise is worth doing. Not get a sweat up, really work yourself out, 45 minutes exercise, at least 5 to 10 minutes to prime the body. So what we're doing here is using the physical to affect the psychological. You're going to move just to make your brain think about something else besides things are difficult, things are stressful, I don't know what's going to happen next. And as well as that, for most of us, we did a bunch of incidental exercise during our day jobs. All of that's gone. Walking from my kitchen to my desk is not as many steps as walking to get coffee used to be. We know that any exercise is going to improve energy and improve sleep. Lots of people have an issue sleeping. It also lowers blood pressure, and again, it reduces stress. So I decided to look for the most ridiculous short exercise thing I could find. And if you have a look at the slides, I linked you to a 20-minute hip hop dance class on YouTube. You could come out of this pandemic being a like incredible hip hop dancer. I'm sure that will impress everybody. I can't wait to go to my in-laws' house and hip hop dance in their lounge room when this is all over. Next step is obviously eat breakfast. I know this stuff is very basic, but at the same time, the basic things are where performance comes from. People don't need gigantic project management systems. I'm certified in a couple of them. Most of performance comes from very simple things. If you don't eat breakfast.
How long?
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, you're saying eat breakfast, which I completely understand is the most important meal of the day.
To be honest, the research on that is bullshit. But yes, go ahead. It's important.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Perfect. I've always struggled with breakfast. It's even since I was a child. I grew up on a farm, so you'd get up, get ready, do the farm work, then come in and eat breakfast. So it could be an hour and a half to 2 hours after being up before you eat.
Yeah, it's fine.
When
Nothing
you
wrong with
speak
that.
when you speak about eating breakfast, so I typically get up between 6 and 6:30 in the morning.
Yep.
I may have a piece of toast and fruit by 8:30.
Perfect.
Is that okay? Or
That's
should
perfect.
it be earlier than that to be more successful? Or should I be eating more than that to be more successful?
You can tweak. So for those of you who are gigantic nerds, you can certainly tweak what you're eating to change some things. So there is a little bit of research out that high protein breakfasts are particularly good for you. Generally, the idea of breakfast food is dumb. Now, I'm not a nutritionist. I don't pretend to be one. There is some stuff saying, though, that what you eat can be important. Not so fussed about that. What we're trying to do is just get your body moving and, to an extent, fueled up before you jump on the computer and start doing work.
I want to chime in here and also add that I tend to eat a small breakfast about 2.5 hours after I get up for the day. And I find that also works for me. So, yep.
Yeah, that's completely fine. Don't feel the need to change something if it's working. Yeah, what most people don't do is typically they don't do the meditation. Some people do some exercise. That breathing meditation will really help. And bizarrely, the next one, which is to journal for 5 to 10 minutes, is a really interesting technique. And again, as my wife will tell you, I have almost no emotional intelligence. Journaling and introspection are things I don't do real well. For this period, there are two benefits for journaling. Firstly, it quiets the monkey mind. It's just somewhere to put down your intrusive thoughts so they don't bother you for the rest of the day. So that's the first benefit of journaling. The second benefit is by writing things down, it allows your subconscious to kind of work on them for a little bit. So you write them down and then you leave them. And oftentimes you'll find that you just crunch through the solution during your day. When you look over it again, you have the next step. But it does take that stress and move it to the side and allow you to focus on what you're doing next. And for this kind of environment, found that to be really helpful. So when the stress intrudes, adding that into the morning routine is just a really nice thing to add in. And then the last one is, as much as you're able to set up a distinct workplace, set up a distinct work zone. Now, obviously, I have a small black dog and no children. This is much easier for me to do than most people. My dog likes to sleep most of the day. She's relatively upset that I'm at home and getting in her way. You know, it's much harder for Wendy to do this, who has 4 kids, than for me to do this, who has a small dog, right? But where you can, you want a work zone and a home zone, and you want those to be distinct. So I know Tracy Lynn set up a work zone as home. Has anyone else got that going on?
Some of the
Yeah, I
things
do.
that I've recommended to clients and other people, because I did some research around it. I'm just fortunate I had this set up for school. Is if you have an extra blanket or a pillow, to throw it over the area you use for work. So kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You shut that door at the end of the day. You shut it. You find some way to make a distinction between your work day and your not work day, because otherwise your work day is going to go for 24 hours. Especially, Carol, you're running a big team. You're worried about your team. Your work day is going to go for 24 hours.
Yeah, I actually don't have a problem turning off my work, but I've always been like that. I'm pretty disciplined at 4:35. I close my computer. I do close the door, go downstairs, and continue on with my life. Now my agents sometimes text or call me, but they know that I normally shut it off, so they know that they're not going to reach out to me if it's in the evenings. Now my husband Steve, who is the broker, whole different story. People are contacting him 24/7, but that was his life before the pandemic, and it's okay with him. He deals with it much better, whereas I've always been like, there's an end to my workday for sure.
And they're definitely distinct styles. For him, I'd recommend trying it. What used to be sustainable 3 months ago may not be sustainable right now. As Tracy Lynn found, you can often hit a wall with this stuff. It's you're moving along really well, and then you just...
Yeah, he is disciplined where we're lucky that we have a gym downstairs. So he works out for a couple hours every day, and he doesn't answer messages at that time.
Hours.
What?
My goodness, that's impressive.
Yeah, I know. And but that's his release. Do you know what I mean? That's how.
See, Pat, now you've got a goal. A couple of hours, buddy. That's what you got to get to.
That's how he relieves his stress. And then if we're watching a movie, he keeps his phone in the office. He doesn't take it out. So he is disciplined, but at the same time, people know that if they reach out to him, he's going to get back to them within an hour or two. Whereas with me, probably not till the next day.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's basically the morning routine. So if you have some of those elements, fantastic. Try for a week adding the other ones in, see how you go. It's not a huge time commitment. And to be honest, I never manage teams for time. I just don't like doing it. It's not how we get really high performing teams over long periods of time. This is worth a little bit of time investment to get your head right for the rest of the day. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to teach you guys a quick technique that we use for setting goals and prioritizing goals. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes, and can I get you to just write down, unless you already prepped it, and I don't know if Rachel sent this out, your current to-do list. So everything's on your to-do list right now. Oh, by the way, guys, if you see me looking down, I'm just taking notes. It's not that I'm not paying attention. I sometimes like to refer back to things.
Do you want us to write down setting our goals, our to-do list for work, or our work and our home life combined?
I'd like to keep those separate. So let's just do work for the moment. Just your current work to-do list. So it could be larger work goals. It could be just people you have to call back and things you have to get done. Both. If there's some, professional development you want to do during this period, all of that would go in. But we'll keep your outside stuff separate, and we'll definitely talk about why that's worth having. But it's worth having separately, because I don't want those to blend together, I want you to have separate fun time that's not work time. Hillary's first goal is make lunch. Her second goal is stop being asked to write things down while making lunch.
Lunch is made and I'm finished eating it.
That was impressively quick.
Yes. Fresh start fromage, creamy pesto, added to your pasta, melts right in.
Very nice. I've got to say that this pandemic, I haven't cooked this much in a long time. I don't know, is that good for me, but I was doing mozzarella stuffed meatballs the other day, and they were epically good. I believe some states in the US have actually sold out of flour. They're sold out here as well? Oh, yeah. So bagged flour has sold out on PI as well because so many people are baking at home.
No Frills has a bunch of bags of flour.
There you go, Laura. There is bagged flour at No Frills if we want to keep making cookies. By
But there's
we.
no yeast anywheres. However, if you can't get your hands on yeast, rustic potatoes is a great supplement to use as yeast.
Yep.
Just for anybody who didn't know that.
Surprisingly, you can also make a pizza base out of potato. Being that I'm an Italian stereotype, I worked in a pizza shop for 5 years.
Cauliflower is, I find, a better base than potatoes.
That would be interesting. I haven't tried cauliflower as a base.
It does work well.
I don't know if we trust your food opinions, Pat.
Well,
Yeah, it really
considering
does.
that considering my wife's a Red Seal chef and she's vegan and gluten free, I don't know, man.
That's why you're too healthy for me. Your stuff is all like lean and excellent, and designed to make you live longer than 45.
You know what also is vegan though? Oreos.
I actually didn't know that because all the vegans I know have a bunch of Oreos and eat a bunch of chips.
Yeah. And I'm not vegan, so I mean, like, yeah, red meat, bring it on. I'm gonna die at 45. That's the goal.
We had a massive steak last night. I could never give up steak and stuff like that, even if I wanted to. And we had sloppy joes the other night because who doesn't like a good sloppy joe every now and again?
I only learned to cook those since coming to Canada, and they are really good.
Yeah, poutine, that's the best thing.
I also plan to support the local lobster industry this year. I know that international exports are down. I'm going to try to make that up myself by eating as much lobster as I possibly can. I plan to give myself gout for the good of the people. Okay, so do people have a to-do list?
Yes.
Great. What I want you to do is grab a piece of paper and draw a big cross. And on one axis, just like on the slides, so on the vertical axis, the top is most important, the bottom is least important. Sorry, no, on the slides is urgent. So the top is most urgent, least urgent. So that's our vertical axis. Our horizontal axis is important. So on this side, on the right-hand side, we have most important. On the left-hand side, we have least important. What you end up with is 4 quadrants. Now what I want you to do is take your tasks and put them onto that set of axes. So the most important and absolutely most urgent task should be in the right-hand top corner. And then everything else should fit somewhere along that. This is called an Eisenhower matrix. It's an old productivity tool, but it works really well. For a little while, I ran medical research projects at a faculty of medicine. And in order to figure out which projects were going to happen when, we just used this method. We found that not only did we get the most important projects done on time, but we also increased our project throughput by about 150%. Just because the entire team knew what we're working on next. So take a couple of minutes to do that. And then we're going to have a look at how you plan and also where your tasks are sitting. And again, this is really simple. This shouldn't take you in a day more than about 5-10 minutes. And we do this at the end of the day so that the decision making is done at the end of the day and you're fresh for the next morning.
This is really great in theory. I love this idea, and I've used it with schooling to get me through assignments and stuff like that. But sometimes I find this to be extraordinarily unrealistic because in my line of work, I could have this all planned and I always have a to-do list for the next day. That's how I finish my work day. But I can be thrown a curveball the next day and this whole thing has gone out the window for me.
Very reasonable and happens incredibly often. Depending on who you're working with. So when I do this with a team, my team does it. Then they have their top tasks, and we'll show you how to get those in a sec. They keep those on the top of their desk on a piece of paper for that day. And occasionally I come in and completely destroy their day. I walk in and say, hi, I need you to do this. We have to drop everything. And they say, great. Which one of these things that I was planning to do gets down prioritized? The advantage of that, if you're working within a leadership structure, is my boss now knows what I'm working on and they tell me which one of the high priority tasks has to wait. It's completely reasonable that comes up. And it's completely reasonable that it displaces stuff because, you know, if I give you extra work, then you can't get the old work done. That's very fair. It's also helpful because oftentimes when you're working in a leadership structure, they'll look at your top priority tasks and they'll say, actually, I want you to keep all those. I'm going to take this other task away from you. Or look, that second one is probably not as important. Let's delay that for a week to let you do this new thing. It's one
funny,
of the tricks with project work.
I used to have a boss that when I said that, like, what do you want me to deprioritize? He'd say, figure it out. I don't work for him anymore.
Yeah, no, there's no accounting for shit management, right? I do a lot of teaching managers how to manage well. And one of the things we do is call them out on garbage like that. I had a guy who used to tell me everything was a priority. And my response was really simple. I'm like, that means nothing is a priority and I'll get to it when I have time. Generally, starting with a list really helps to visually show your boss, like, these are my top things. If we add something in here that's completely reasonable, you're the boss, I'm happy to do that. But that means something drops off the bottom. And when you run, so we run agile teams. When you run agile teams, this happens all the time and it's completely fine. We don't do that kind of super rigid planning where you pretend that nothing in the world is going to change. And certainly I've talked to some companies who are really upset because they're not going to make their third quarter goals. Like, well, guys, the whole world got a bit different. Probably not realistic goals anymore. Oh, no, but we wrote them down. I get that. Sure. That kind of rigid planning is not helpful. This is not that. It's not a high pressure activity. It's to give you a short list. And then if stuff comes on, it comes on. That's not a big deal. So once you have your list, can I ask which quadrant most of your tasks are in? So are they high urgency, high importance, least urgency, least importance, least urgency, or high urgency, least important?
Mine are mostly split between most important, most urgent, but I do have some after doing this that I didn't think were, but are now put into the least important, least urgent categories.
Great. Carol?
Mine were mostly in the second one.
Most important, least urgent?
Yeah.
If I had a gold star, you would have a gold star. Hillary, how about you?
I have a couple in most important, most urgent, for some deadline stuff, but usually it's most important, least urgent.
So generally, this is my litmus test of how you're coping. When I walk into organizations that are falling apart, everything is in most important, most urgent. When I walk into organizations that are running really smooth, although it does depend on what their deadline timelines are like, but the more stuff you have in most important, least urgent, generally the better you're going. Now, it's nice to identify least important, least urgent, because I've never met any high performer who has time to do everything they want to do. And so those are the things we let slide off the plate. Yeah. They're the low reward work. Generally what I start with is you need to get that top quadrant, most important, most urgent, that we call that crisis. That's the stuff that needs to be hammered off immediately because it's going to have large repercussions. So I start from the top right-hand corner, and generally what I want you guys to do, now you're all doing pretty good. So maybe Carol, this is more for your agents. Get them to pick two, the top two closest from the top corner. There's a couple reasons we do this at night. And I think Tracy Lynn already does this at night. So I'd be interested to hear how she feels about it. Generally, what we want to do is minimize what we call decision fatigue. So back when there was a president in the States who knew what he was doing, he wore one suit 95% of the time. In fact, there was one point where he wore a brown suit and like the media lost their minds because that was apparently important. But if you look at Obama's photos, if you look at any of his press conferences and interviews, he's always wearing the same color blue suit, white shirt, blue tie. And the reason for that isn't that he's not a fashionable guy. It's that he deliberately chose to minimize decision fatigue. Our brains are not designed to constantly make decisions. So biologically speaking, decision making is really, really expensive and difficult. Because of that, our brains take shortcuts. So if you're really anybody, one of the shortcuts your brain will take, but this really applies to kids often, is that it will look for the decisions that people around you are making and will make those decisions. That concept is called social proof. They use it in marketing all the time. What they don't tell you about it is the reason that we do that is because our brains get tired. And generally, if I'm making lots of decisions, the decisions at the end of that period, so after I've made 25 other decisions, even if those decisions were relatively small ones, the decisions at the end are less good than decisions at the beginning. That's decision fatigue. It is a big problem for leaders. And so lots of leaders I know are now setting these really strict morning routines to free up their brains to work on the important stuff. The other thing that we do is we plan at night so that the next day you go to work and you don't have to figure out what you're going to work on. There are only two things you're going to work on and you can go straight into those. So decision fatigue is worth thinking about. And using a prioritization matrix, it doesn't prevent emergencies coming up for sure, but it does keep people focused on the most important things, and it minimizes that stack of decisions, which is going to be really bad for you. Does anybody want to have any input on that? Does that make sense to you guys that if you're making 87 decisions in a day, by the end you're exhausted because your brain isn't good at that? Now, all of you guys are actually coping fairly well, but you may have members on your team that aren't. And so this is a small thing that tends to have a disproportionate benefit. So we actually see an improvement. That's it. That's the only planning technique I'm going to give you. Just one, just 2 targets for a day.
I know for me, because you had mentioned my name.
Yep.
I know for me, one, it does help me be successful the next day because when I get into the office or when I go to work at home, I know immediately what I'm working on. The other thing is if I do my to-do list at the end of the day for work, then I can completely shut down from work. I don't think about it anymore because I know what I'm doing the next day. So it also gives me that barrier of I'm done, my list is done, and I don't think about work for the rest of the night.
Which are both really good things at the moment. To be honest, they're good things generally. It's just that when you put pressure on things, if there's any weaknesses, they crack. And so lots of teams I'm seeing at the moment, they were doing okay, but as they're getting squeezed, you're starting to see the stress points. And so these little things that help drop the stress is generally kind of helpful. During the day, there's actually only one technique we're going to talk about, and we call that the Pomodoro technique. So Pomodoro is Italian for tomato, which is why I say it in Italian accent, which makes no sense because why would you name a time management technique after a tomato? Turns out the guy who started using this had a tomato timer on his desk. The idea here is lots of people that I'm dealing with at the moment feel really guilty because they don't feel like they're doing as much as they would normally do in a workday because they have kids who interrupt them while they're at work, and that's very reasonable. They've got to take time to supervise schoolwork. I've got to take time to explain to my 88-year-old dad why going to the supermarket in an area with community transmission in Australia is a really bad idea. And I've had to explain to my mum why this isn't the flu like 6 times. You would think that when you have doctor before your name, they would just listen. Doesn't happen like that. Oh, but my neighbor said it was just like the flu. That means that instead of being productive for 7-8 hours like we normally would, for many of us, we want to carve out chunks of productive time because it's much easier to say to the kids, look, I'm going to take an hour now and go and do some stuff, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to have a look at your maths. As opposed to saying, I'm going to go sit in this room for 8 hours. It often doesn't happen. And so for some people, they're finding that a distributed workday where they do a couple of hours in the morning, a couple of hours in the afternoon, and maybe an hour or two in the evening when everyone else has gone to bed is working much better. So the technique that we use for that is called the Pomodoro technique. You basically set a timer. Generally, that's 25 minutes. When the timer rings at the end, you have a check mark. You take a short 5-minute break. The aim is to try to set a series of 3 or 4 of those timers in a row and have that as your block. So if we say, okay, 3, let's say 4 timers, 25 minutes each with a 5-minute break is half an hour. We've set aside a 2-hour block for work, and there's a maximum of one thing to do in each of those time periods and a short break in between to refocus. And then after that 2 hours, go and do maths with your kids. Go and make some lunch. I've got friends who disinfect their house every 3 hours. Completely reasonable. But at least that establishes a block during the day that's high productivity time. And then you can pick a couple of those. So you can say, okay, from 10 to 12, from 2 to 4, and then when everybody goes to bed from 8 to 10, I'm going to have these high productivity blocks. And if I'm not productive in the meantime, that's okay. Again, for knowledge workers, which is what all your teams are, generally we look for output, not necessarily time. And so a lot of people are feeling really bad and they're not being productive because they're trying to run a normal workday at home with all of these not normal things intruding on it, and they're getting really stressed out about not being able to pocket out 8 hours. Realistically, if you have kids and you have parents at home, it's not going to happen. So if you can instead carve out 3 2-hour blocks in a day or 4 2-hour blocks in a day, and then, keep time for those interruptions and have that to be fine, have it scheduled in, it can really help with productivity. And also the hard focus, short gap, hard focus thing tends to work really well for some people. So generally we were seeing when we implemented this in companies, productivity go up anywhere from 25 to 50%. Again, it's just another quick win. I find that when teams and when people get momentum, then it's really easy for them to kick on and keep going. But when you lose momentum in this kind of situation, it's also really easy to spend 3 days staring at the wall and getting nothing done. The other thing that we do, and again, don't feel the need, it's just a tip. We've added in, and I'd be really interested to hear what you guys are doing. we've added in a non-work section to work. So we've got a weekly call where we check in on the team, and we don't talk about anything to do with work at all. We set a couple of challenges. We've set a book club. There was, for a little while, an Instagram cooking competition going where you had to Instagram your food. And I learned that other people in the group are way, way more impressive cooks than I will ever be. And just ridiculous activities. So one of the things that's been suggested to one of my clients is everybody sends in their baby photos. And then the first 10 minutes of the meeting is trying to figure out who the hell is who. The benefit of that is it's funny, it's silly, it's stupid. We used to be able to do that 3 months ago. Take 20 minutes to be funny and silly. Now everything's gotten real serious. By injecting a little bit of that funny and silly back in, it just drops the pressure level. And it helps the people who their head's somewhere else because they're worried about something, to bring focus back and free it up, reset them so they can move back onto the work things. So we do that kind of stuff at the beginning of the meetings. We also really recommend that people pick an outside work goal. This is what Tracy Lynn was talking about earlier. What is something fun that you can develop now that you didn't have a chance to before? Because I'm a giant nerd, I am going back and finishing video games from my childhood. But I'm sure most of you have like much healthier activities. Pat Ferrara is, marathon training. Erin is taking up sculpture or something equally important to the world. What about you guys? What are you doing outside of work?
I'm not a gamer. I've never been a gamer. I didn't grow up with video games. But the last several weeks, my son's been teaching me how to play Dead by Daylight.
Oh, nice. That is a good place to start. It's a zombie game. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is really a good game, but he's at like level 76 and his character level is 25 and I'm learning on that level.
Yep. So you die a lot.
Yeah. But I never understood video games. I'm getting on, and it's a great way for him and I to bond in the evenings for a couple of hours or for an hour.
Makes a big difference. My wife is playing Animal Crossing. She's the most high productivity person I've ever met. And she spends like half an hour a day planting trees in a game I do not understand, but it's been really useful. I know a couple of people who are at home working on project cars after work because it lets them switch off. And again, Erin I'm just assuming she's painting, the Mona Lisa at home. When this is all finished, we'll give her a Nobel Prize or something. So encouraging your team to take some time to talk about outside work stuff. The advantage of that is at the moment, the outside work stuff is bleeding into work team meetings, and we want to keep those separate. There's always one person in every big company who every time they get on a Zoom, they're like, look, I'm in my pajamas. You're like, yeah, in a month, you got to go back to the office and then walk around with these people. Maybe don't do that. So having a designated outside work, what are you doing to keep yourself well and happy and creative is really good because it frees up the work meeting to be a work meeting again. And most of us have people in our teams that live alone. And those are the guys who I am most worried about at the moment. I had one of my old teams, we had a lady who was 85. She retired for one day and then came back to work the next day because she missed us apparently. But all of her kids were on the other side of the country. And so she'd go home and not talk to anybody. Her husband had passed away a couple of years ago. That meant from Friday night to Monday morning, she didn't talk to anybody. That informed my management style. And at the moment, I run a team of super high performers, but a bunch of them are here doing special projects and didn't grow up here. They're all from away. And that means that 4 of them live completely by themselves and they haven't seen anybody else for the last 7 weeks. And obviously, we're doing really well on the island at the moment and we're easing back rollbacks. This is likely to be a marathon, not a sprint. There is every chance that we're going to have to do lockdown again. And so it's good to set up these routines now. Laura, somebody's looking for cherries in Animal Crossing. Where do we find those? Laura says different islands have cherries. If Laura has cherries, if we will find a way to get you some cherries. I don't know exactly who's looking for cherries, but we will certainly find a way to get you some cherries. What are you guys doing outside of work, and how are you encouraging that in your teams?
So we luckily bought a pool table back in February, and my pool skills are not great. So I've been brushing up on those and getting better.
So when this is all over, we're going to take you to a bar and you can win all the money.
Well, it's funny because as an office, we had a pool tournament a couple of months ago, and I wasn't very good. So now I'm keen to have another one and surprise them all that I'm much better now.
I like it. I like it. I want to do a bake sale when we get back because I think I'll be useful. Now, the last couple of things I put in here is some interesting resources. So CBC Canada is doing music live streams, which have just been really nice because they're like a concert you can do at home. I put a link to the Wim Hof breathing exercises. Those are bizarrely powerful. I would try those. For those of you who have kids, there is a list of live stream readings of children's books, which are really helpful. Turns out that my wife wrote a kid's book specifically about helping to talk to kids about the pandemic in a way that's empowering and not scary. That got featured on a podcast. So I'm happy to send that link to people too if they'd like. And I think, Laura, did you get a video of that? You did. Yeah, she's got a video of that as well, just as something to give an outside voice and take some of that stress away. And then the last link is the Internet Archive, which has a ton of free books, free video, and free audio. If you want to do things like set up a reading club or a book club for your team. That's it for me, guys. The last slide is just my email address, not my work one. It's my private one and my phone number. If you think I can help your team at all, I'm happy to volunteer some time and do that. I'm no good in a lab. I can't intubate anybody. I can't make a ventilator. I can do this stuff, and I'm really happy to help if I can. And that's really all I had. I just want to leave the floor open, see if anybody wants to talk about what's working for them, anything they're struggling with. I might be able to jump in with some quick advice.
So what would be your advice for youth who are still having to do schooling at home? They're unable to see their friends, which is the most important thing in their lives, and trying to keep them motivated and engaged to, stay on top of their schoolwork.
Generally,
Like,
now,
how do we
keep
make
in
them
mind,
as productive
how old are we talking
in
about?
that ability?
So generally, my advice.
I work with youth 14 to 24.
Okay. Is we are pushing this schoolwork thing way harder than we need to be. We really are pushing it a lot harder than I'm comfortable with. And my background in teaching is got about 15 years of teaching secondary. I've got about 10 years of teaching university, med school, statistics, genetics, business. So I know a little bit about how much work I would expect people to do in this period. And I would expect that my primary outcome for kids is not massive learning gains. It's just mental health. Like it's just not making things miserable, because it's a really hard time if you're a kid. I don't know why we seem to be putting all this pressure on. Certainly when I have conversations with my academic colleagues, I just say, look, guys, I'm taking it easy on classes. I'm expecting that a bunch of them are going to struggle. And as long as they're doing okay personally, that's my primary concern. We can always catch up on the work later. It's not that big a deal. All I would try to do at the moment is get them to read for fun if you can, because that makes a massive difference. And there is a bunch of really good resources from people who are experts at developing online learning. And in particular, I'm thinking Princeton and Khan Academy. Khan Academy does a lot of secondary, tertiary stuff, and Princeton has put out a bunch of courses for free of its tertiary courses. That gets you ahead. And unlike a lot of our teachers who are working incredibly hard but are not practiced at online delivery, these guys are really good at it. Otherwise, for productivity's sake, I would say with kids, I do the same thing. I say, look, task-based and not time-based. So what used to take you 4 hours in a schoolroom can take you 45 minutes at home. That's fine. And work on applications and not reading textbooks, because that's awful and it won't work for you. So generally we want them writing stuff down. We want them doing exercises with applications. And then when they look for resources, looking for the places that are already good at making online learning. But yeah,
So why are schools still focused on this online learning? Like, I know I have clients, even my own son who's in high school, who has hours upon hours of homework and work every week.
If I knew, my frustration with this is epic, particularly because, I mean, our math on the island is weak. I think everybody who deals with kids understands that. Generally, high school science, if you're in the end of secondary education, in tertiary education, we spend the first year reteaching you high school stuff anyway, because a lot of it is not what we need you to be able to do for tertiary. I don't know why we have this massive worry that kids are going to fall behind. We can catch them up if they're behind. You know, I'm much more concerned about them really working themselves into a hole and damaging themselves. I used to do a little bit of work with kids who came out of some really rough places. So in Australia, they were from refugee war zones and like not safe environments. And being unsafe for long periods of time as a kid is a big concern. That would be my primary concern. How do we make kids feel safe in a period of time that isn't that safe? Far more than like, how do we get them to get the next concept in maths? Because really, with an adequate teacher, you can do 6 months worth of maths in 3 weeks. It's not that difficult. And that I can honestly say from experience, because I've often taught kids 6 months worth of maths in 3 weeks. We can always catch them up on that stuff. The other stuff is much harder. So making sure they call their friends and play games together with them, hang out on the phone, chat. Just kind of don't lose touch and don't lose hope is much more important to me personally than worrying about if my last assignment should be done on time. And certainly I'm in the minority there, but generally I've eased everything back for my uni students. I've redesigned the assessments to be a little bit less intense, and I've given them a lot more help. And then I've just dropped the time commitments down, because there are other things that are important. Yeah, you're not alone. I know most parents and most people who deal with kids are finding it's incredibly challenging to turn homes into classrooms while you also have to work a full-time job. And I just don't know why we're trying to win that fight. Like, that seems like a dumb fight to win.
I just don't understand why there's so much work. Like, my son goes out and hangs out with his friends, he games with his friends, he talks to his friends, he Snapchats or whatever else with his friends, and I'm fine with that. He even went out for a 2-hour walk with one of his friends yesterday, but the work is ridiculous. And I have parents asking me, well, so-and-so doesn't want to do this, and how do I make them? And it's like, I don't have an answer.
Look, I think the answer is don't. The child is always more important than the curriculum. And I mean, generally, I'm honestly having the same strange conversation with a bunch of my colleagues who are like, well, this is the things I was meant to get done this month, and I'm not getting them all done. what am I going to do? The sky is falling. I'm like, guys, like, you're more important than the job. Take a breath. And if we don't get everything done we're trying to get done, it's okay. I need you to be here at the end of this. I don't need you to be at 110% during it. Generally, my advice is ease back. And the next couple of months are going to be really challenging for educators. I think they're going to learn to pare back what they're asking people to do. At the moment, they're still in that, this is all new and it's very scary for them, and they're pushing really hard because they want to deliver good value to the students, but I don't know that approach is sustainable. And that's just my opinion. It's not my, it's certainly not the opinion of the university. But generally, I'm thinking about how can we cut down the amount of work? What's the absolute minimum that they have to be good at? And how can I make the work interactive? Because a kid sitting at a kitchen table working all day by themselves is not a good experience.
No, I agree. I just find it frustrating.
No, super frustrating. Super frustrating. Khan Academy and stuff like that helps because their work is designed to be interactive. And so they do short videos explaining stuff, and they're interesting, and they're much more engaging than somebody telling you to read a chapter of a textbook. And they're short. And kids don't have anybody who wants to talk about this more because I'm a giant nerd. Generally, because of the differences in brain development, because of social media and connectivity, so the last 20 years, because of the internet, kids don't remember things in the same way as somebody who was educated 40 years ago. And so those differences are important, and we should start thinking about what can we do to work with them, as opposed to telling them that they should be able to sit for 4.5 hours and read a book. Doesn't happen.
I can't do that.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. I get on a soapbox sometimes. I will avoid doing that. Anyone else? Any questions or suggestions of stuff we can do? Yes, don't lick my feet, dog. That's weird.
Okay, so I was in a note on this one, Vince, but I was just spent 2 hours with Canada Post. So I was like listening to their music while also kind of listening in on your stuff. The routines is really interesting and something I'm going to try to stick to a little bit more. Every morning's different for me. And I almost like to have that in my routine where I'm always like experimenting with one different thing. So there's still a morning routine there, but I thought that was interesting, and it was nice to hear some other morning routines that maybe I can steal a bit from.
For me, the big incorporating journaling and a breathing exercise was massively important. And look, the science behind both those things are weird, but generally there's a reason that so many high performers do them, because they just tend to make a big difference. Just taking that stress out of my brain and putting it on paper, and then being able to shut the book, has freed up so much more time to focus on the work. I got to say, the exercise part I don't love. You know that about me. I'm not Carol's husband. He's a very impressive man. That's super impressive. If I get like 15 minutes in the morning or 10 minutes in the morning, I feel like I'm doing pretty good. And then I try to take the dog for a walk a couple times a day, but that's about it. But that 10 minutes in the morning, it's just for the mental benefits. So the physical benefits are great. And for those of you who do that stuff, that's awesome. But this is just, even if you don't do it normally, the mental gains from resetting with some exercise are really worth doing.
Yeah, I like mindfulness, any meditation stuff. I've started practicing like the Gita. I'm not like a religious person. My wife is, so I guess you would consider Hindi, and practicing Hinduism. But, the whole idea of the mind and the intellect. So it's not religious at all, but it's just the way we think with our conscious and our subconscious, and how, your mind will just do things that you like to do and routines and Netflix, but then your intellect is kind of a piece of things aren't good to do, but they're good for you. So you dislike them, but they're good for you, like exercise and eating well. anyway, so it's just this interesting. It's nice to take those steps back when you can.
Yeah.
And
With our executive coaching, and I've done a little bit under a guy who's really good at this stuff. We have a very strange dichotomy in the West, doesn't exist in the rest of the world. We separate kind of mind and body into two distinct areas, just like we separate logic and spirituality into two distinct areas. That doesn't exist in most parts of the world. Generally, the first thing that I tell executives to do is go to sleep earlier. The first thing we tell them to do, go to sleep, drink less. Those two things improve your mental performance. And you're right, like those little things, as much as I hate exercise, it's important and I need to do more of it just because it makes you a better thinker. It makes you a better problem solver. And it drops down a bunch of hormones which were designed to make you survive a tiger attack. And that's really what stress management is. It's reclaiming creative thinking in an environment that's sending you into fight, flight, freeze. Which is good fun. Like it's an interesting challenge.
Chair yoga is a great way to have coffee in the morning and do some stretching and relaxing for
I'm so impressed by you guys.
for those people who don't want to, go for a run or anything. Chair yoga is another great activity that's low impact but still builds those endorphins.
I went to one yoga class, and I've got to say, I've never been hurt that much in my life. And keep in mind, I used to do like full contact kickboxing, and I've still never been hurt as much in my life as a yoga. Yoga people are super impressive, but they're like immune to pain.
Well, chair yoga you might find a lot easier. It's not as bad.
in between, yeah.
You notice how she said not as bad? Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. Again, my contact details are there. If you think I can help with anything, give me a call. I'm really happy to take some time and to take anybody through any of this stuff. I think the next couple of months, we're all in together, and this is how we move everybody forward. And I'm very much looking forward to standing in a line at the grocery shop when this is all over. I'm just going to stand in lines for the sake of it, just to stand next to people, just to do it, be fine. I'm going to find one of those annoying close talkers that everybody used to avoid, just hang out with them for 6 hours. It'll be great.
Love it.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Vince.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.